Hello, my name is Nigel. But of course you would have guessed that because everyone who speaks this way is named Nigel. Now, I was considering doing this entire podcast in character, but a couple of things interrupted that. First of all, it would be hella confusing, and yeah, I occasionally say hella. Secondly, I'm not that good with accents. Even though I occasionally try to do them, I know I'm not very good at it, especially when I'm singing. Sometimes I try to sing in an accent. I put some non-English words in there, and anytime that you know songs in another language, you kind of try to fit the accent, and I'm not necessarily any good at it. I mean, I can kind of sing Kosi Sikeleli Africa, but if you're from South Africa, you just listen to that and you said, oh dude, you got it completely wrong. So I decided not to do that. I decided to respect my audience and say, you know what, don't do Nigel through the whole podcast. It's ridiculous. Instead, I'm going to just do J. Nelson Leith. And I'm going to talk to you about two things. The first thing is, today, I kind of went around, on the advice of a friend, I kind of went around to a local bookstore, which is Poetry Prose on the Wharf. I'll put a link up here somewhere, where I usually put it, because they're a cool bookstore, and just to check things out. And as you would know it, because it's me and I do so many book unboxings, I walked in just kind of trying to get the lay of the land, and what ended up happening? I ended up buying 2 books. Actually, you know what? Before I do my unboxing of 2 other books, because I'm pathological, let me pull out the books. I think they're still in my book bag. Yes, this book bag, it screams ex-military. I spent 10 years in the Navy. There are still some things that I cling to, and I like this book bag a lot. It's small. Well, small is not the word. Compact. I like the fact that it's compact, and it's one of my favorite backpacks, although I have like 4 of them that I switch out every once in a while. That's not for God's sake, I'm wearing a freaking, look at this, it's Virginia Beach, but it's got an anchor on it. It kind of screams, I could have gotten anything beachy on my shirt, and I went, oh, there's an anchor one. Well, there's a sailor for you. It's not just Marines that are always what they were. Okay. You're like, get to the damn books, you moron. Okay, here are the 2 books that I saw at the bookstore, which the link had. You know what? Post-production, John, you better still have the link up there, because that stuff about the shirt and the book and the backpack, that was not an important part of the podcast. Leave the link up. That's me scolding my future self. Okay, let me do this in order because I found this one first. The first one was this. And look at this. I was so just crazy. I mean, if you watch this podcast, you know John's going to buy that book. This was in the history section. It's called, craft. That AE is the A sound. So they did a good job. If it were just the A sound, then traditionally it would be craft, which would sound a little bit too much like Nigel speaking through me. I mean, I am English. I am like 80% English by background. So maybe I should just own that. Maybe I should just start speaking that way. I don't speak the way that I used to when I was growing up. I grew up in West Virginia, and I lost a lot of my accent when I moved out of West Virginia. You may still hear a hint of it. A lot of people do, and they ask me weirdly. They ask me if I'm from Texas, which is fine. I don't have anything against Texas. And it's part of that same Midlands dialect that sort of swings. There's this sort of swath of dialect in the United States that swings from West Virginia through Arkansas into Texas. And so I kind of get how a lot of people think I'm from Texas. Plus, I think I have much more of a kind of a Texas attitude than I do a West Virginia attitude. But if I spoke the way that I spoke when I grew up, I might need subtitles, because when I grew up in West Virginia, we had a very thick accent, and sometimes I still slip into it, especially if I get worked up about something. But I don't really talk like that anymore. I remember it, but I don't talk like that anymore. A lot of my family still do, because most of my family still lives in West Virginia. I don't have anything against it, but after I left West Virginia, I kind of felt like it wasn't really representative of who I had become as a person. It was more, I'm kind of a cosmopolitan, and I still have some hillbilly tendencies. I like to be outside a lot. Oh my God! When I was in Hawaii, one of my favorite things is that the trails in Hawaii are so. See, I've slipped back out of it. The trails in Hawaii are so clean. There's not a lot of litter like there is, in on the mainland. And in Hawaii, you can actually, if you want to, hike barefoot. And put a hillbilly in Hawaii, I'm taking my shoes off. I might take them with me, in case things get bad. But I used to hike barefoot a lot in Hawaii. I loved it. I love being outside. And I still have a lot of there's some parts of me that are still redneck at heart, but I don't live there, and I don't talk. I don't really sound like I'm from West Virginia so much anymore. And even though I'm mostly English in background, according to DNA, although I still have a DNA test here that I need to do. Where is that DNA test? It's the 23andMe one. I need to do that one. I don't speak like Nigel either. Although perhaps I should. If I ever do any reenacting as a British naval officer, which I'm actually considering, I should develop that accent. I should watch more films with British actors and figure out exactly how they speak and create a backstory based on that. Although, the whole received pronunciation thing did not really start until after the period I would want to reenact. Brits didn't talk like that in the 16 and 1700s, and I'm way off track. I'm sitting here holding this book, and you're like, talk about the book! Why do you think we watch your podcast, you idiot? Because you talk about books. Well, this book is about crafts. And it's an inquiry into the origins and true meanings of traditional crafts. And this, because I recently did an elevator pitch for a sort of Stone Age role-playing video game, and I like medieval and early modern crafts, and this book just fascinated me because it goes into how people did things and why people did things back in the day. I pulled this book off the shelf, and I was like, you're screwed, dude. You're buying this book. I mean, this stuff from making hay, beekeeping, taming the wilds, weft and warp, thatching, roofs. It's just, the kind of thing that I'm going to like. I don't know when I'm going to get to reading this because I have so much already, but I didn't want to walk. For one thing, I kind of feel rude walking into a bookstore and then just sort of walking out going, see you fellas, thanks for letting me look at all your books. But this wasn't a guilt purchase. This was me genuinely wanting to read this book and I'm going to put it somewhere in a read pile and read it at some point. Then, as I was looking at another display, I saw this book by John Julius Norwich. I mean, that's a pretty British name right there. And it's published by Thames and Hudson, which is kind of a cross-Atlantic thing. Thames and Hudson. Okay, I'm just going to show you the cover. See the cover? Well, you don't see it when I said it. But this book is basically it's very short chapters about tons of cities. It starts in the ancient world, then the first millennium AD, which would be, kind of the classical world, Dark Ages, then the medieval world, the early modern world. I mean, just look at how many different cities they're talking about. Very short chapters, which would mean they're going to be easy to digest. And so everything from Thebes, Hattusa, which is a Hittite city. By the way, the archaeology in the past 20 years into Hittite civilization is just amazing. It's one of the things that fascinates me, because the Hittites were something. It's something you didn't learn. If you're at a certain age, you didn't learn about this stuff in school. But the Hittites were very important to the Bronze Age. Nineveh, Carthage, Athens, Lindsay, Jerusalem, Meroe, the royal city of Nubia, and then it goes into Teotihuacan, Tikal, Mecca, Damascus, Chang'an in China, Isfahan, Agra, Rome, of course. And then as it gets more, into the early modern age, Montreal, New York, Sao Paulo, or I guess I should say Sao Paulo. You got to nasalize that sound in Portuguese. So this book, again, I looked at it and I was like, oh God, don't look at the table of contents. And then, of course, because I have no discipline when it comes to books, I'm just such a, they've got me. And I looked at the table of contents and I guess I'm buying 2 books today. I just intended to walk into this bookstore and sort of check it out. Politics and Prose, you got me. Anyway, let me do my double unboxing. And I'll be honest, I have not checked Amazon. I don't know what's in here. I have no idea. I know what I've ordered, but I don't know what showed up. I just get these notifications from my apartment complex. Wow, that is really a noisy package. I get these notifications from my apartment complex that say, you have received a package and it's waiting for you at the front office. And I go down. Sometimes I check Amazon to see what it is. Recycling pile. Recycle all of your recyclable garbage. I know that there are stories out there that say that recycling, sometimes they just send the stuff to the landfills anyway. But you know what? There's something to be said about trying. So you don't know. Just recycle everything that you can that's recyclable. Okay, you know how over the past few podcasts I've talked about my colonial architecture reading pile, which actually I won't say reading pile because a lot of it is reference, which I want to use just for to have information and to inform my writing in historical fantasy. This looks more like something you need to read straight through because of the way it's constructed. It's more like a nonfiction study of architecture, and it's divided up. Let me go to the table of contents. It's divided up into thematic sections. So we have the colonial styles, chapter 1, the colonial house in New England colonial architecture. This seems to be kind of repetitive. Dutch colonial architecture. Okay, now we're mixing it up a little bit. Southern colonial architecture, which the way that things were set up in the South is something that's really sort of an ignore. We think of colonial times and we normally think of the North, but the South also, there were colonies in the South. We think about, for example, in my tavern and stagecoach reading pile. There is some talk about how things were different in the South from Maryland on down south because there weren't so many taverns and inns along the roads because people would just stop at plantation houses and stay there and expect to stay there, and there were laws actually about the sort of hospitality that you had to show visitors, and people would just hang out for free in your house for days, and you just had to feed them and house them. Kind of interesting. You can't imagine what that would be. In today's world, where we value our privacy, that's a really alien concept. But in the South, where there weren't really many towns. It was very much more of a plantation culture, for better and for worse. People, instead of staying at inns and taverns along the roads, they would stay at people's houses. So this book is going to be something that I'm going to have to dig into. It's full of diagrams and photographs, but it's also very small text and it's very thick. Although, you know what? I've read Margaret Barker, which is some dense, very academic reading. So I think I can get through this without killing my brain too much. As a matter of fact, I'm probably going to just geek out on this once I finally get to it. Great. Anyway, so excited. I don't even know if I'll get to that before the year's end, but we'll see. Second book that I'm unboxing. How am I going to do this? I'm cutting close to the book, but not enough to put it in danger. And put the scissors away in their usual place. Oh, look, it's double wrapped. How adorable. We all love that, don't we? No, we don't. And of course, they've obscured the cover, so I have to take it out of the double wrapping. This is a hardback. It looks like a remaindered library book, which I'm kind of sad when I get those, because I'm like, there were people who could be reading this book, but now they can't because now I own it. But at the same time, their loss is my gain, and the cover's a little... Well, look, this book got some good use, because look, clearly people were reading this book. This is American Small Sailing Craft. You can imagine why I would like this book, because I'm into the age of sail, and I kind of like to know how sailing actually worked back in that time. And you get a lot of books about big, ships, barks, brigantines. But I wanted something about, especially since technically I live on Chesapeake Bay, because DC, where I live, is at sea level. A fascinating fact that a lot of people don't know. All the way up to Georgetown, the Potomac River is at sea level. It's part of the tidal dynamic of the Chesapeake Bay. And so the Chesapeake Bay and the surrounding coastal territories, a lot of different boat styles and people in different areas and in different sounds and bays and stuff, they use different boat styles. So this kind of goes into, as you can see, different, very technical descriptions of different boat styles in the United States. Small sailing craft. Love the cover. This I have to be very careful with the book jacket here. I want to keep that book jacket on there, although it's really raggedy. That's sad. People should have been taking better care of this. But this book is going to be something fun to read for me. Over 100 plans and illustrations. Nerd out time! Anyway, I hope that this rambling podcast hasn't completely turned you off to Thoughts of Leith. This is something that I knew I was going to nerd out, because I nerded out in the bookstore and couldn't help myself. And all the time I was thinking about this today, and I was thinking about why I like this period and how weird it is that I've always been fascinated by this period, even before I knew much about my own ancestry. I kind of want to learn more. I want to learn more about what people did during this time, not just English people, but there are plenty of people from different places in Europe. Of course, Africans who were brought over here unwillingly, and I'm very fascinated about that. I might actually do a whole podcast, because I've read some very fascinating books about African Americans in this period in history, and stuff that just I was surprised at how much we actually know, considering the status that these people did not enjoy during this period. We do know quite a bit about how they lived and how they brought lifeways from Africa over here. I should do a whole podcast on that one day. And of course, the Native Americans and just people from all over the world who found themselves thrown into the mix during this unique period in history. It just fascinates me, and since I live here and I travel up and down the East Coast, this period is just fascinating to me. I grew up inland from here, but it's just captured my imagination and my fascination. So I just want to learn as much as I can about it, because in a way, this part of history was like a prologue to modern history, where now we're living in a world where we're all thrown into the mix together in a global society. And so the lessons of this period in history, where people got things right, where people got things wrong, can really help us understand what to do now that we're all living in this very interconnected world, where the community is really the earth, and nation states are the neighborhoods. So to me, it just makes this sort of history very informative, very fascinating, and I love to see how people were living and how they were interacting with each other. So if you find this kind of thing interesting, I would be highly surprised. You're probably sitting there going, I can't believe I watched this whole thing. What the hell is this guy talking about? But if you find it interesting, then like this video on YouTube. If you're watching this somewhere else, embedded somewhere, click over to YouTube and like it there, because that's where it really counts. Like it, share it with your friends so that your friends can think that you're just as weird as I am, and subscribe, because I'll give you 1,000 opportunities to, again, watch my podcast and go, this guy's out of his mind. But thank you again for watching Thoughts of Leith.